What if I told you that one of Hollywood's greatest directors spent 25 years building an empire with a monster? And when that monster finally fell, the director didn't just lose a business partner, he lost his soul.
It's sad. It's sad. It was like, he wasn't just this guy who financed my movies. He was, kind of like a father figure. I mean, he was kind of a fucked up father figure, but that's most people's fucking father. Yeah. He was a fucked up father figure.
This is the story of Quentin Tarantino and Harvey Weinstein, two men who conquered Hollywood together only to have their legacy destroyed by the very secrets that built it. Everyone knows Harvey Weinstein is a predator. Everyone knows he's in prison.
He's raped many people that I love. So it's not really a happy occasion. I think maybe there will be some celebration when he gets convicted and goes to jail. That's when the process will be complete and we will see justice really being served.
But what nobody talks about is the man who knew his darkest secrets for decades and kept making movies with him anyway. See, this isn't just another #MeToo story. This is about something far more disturbing: how power, money, and artistic ambition can make good people do terrible things. I'm about to expose the most toxic friendship in Hollywood history. We'll reveal what Tarantino actually knew, when he knew it, and why he chose his career over his conscience for 25 years. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Tarantino calls this relationship his greatest failure, and why it might be the real reason he's retiring from filmmaking forever. Because sometimes the price of genius is your humanity. The golden years. Building an empire on secrets. Let's start at the beginning, when Quentin Tarantino and Harvey Weinstein were Hollywood's most unstoppable duo. Picture this, it's 1994. Tarantino is a nobody video store clerk with a crazy script called Pulp Fiction. Every studio in town has passed on it. Too weird, too violent, too risky. Then Harvey Weinstein reads it. Not only does he buy it, he pushes it into Cannes. He campaigns for Oscar nominations. He turns an $8 million indie film into a cultural phenomenon that makes $214 million worldwide. This wasn't just business. This was Harvey Weinstein creating Quentin Tarantino as we know him. For the next 25 years, their partnership was legendary. Weinstein's companies, first Miramax, then the Weinstein Company, financed or distributed almost every major Tarantino film. Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained. They weren't just business partners. They were friends. Harvey threw Quentin an engagement party in 2017. They socialized together. They built their reputations together. But here's what makes this story so dark. The entire time, Tarantino knew Harvey was a predator, and he kept working with him anyway. The first crack, Mira Sorvino's confession. The first time Quentin Tarantino learned Harvey Weinstein was a sexual predator was in the mid-1990s, and it came from the woman he loved. Mira Sorvino was Tarantino's girlfriend. She was also an actress trying to build her career in Harvey's Hollywood. One day she told Quentin something that should have ended their partnership forever. Harvey had given her an unwanted massage. He chased her around a hotel room trying to get physical with her. Then, and this is where it gets really disturbing, he showed up at her apartment after midnight, uninvited. Tarantino's own words, "I was shocked and appalled. I thought, really? Really? So what did he do with this information?" Nothing. Instead, he rationalized it. He convinced himself Harvey was just hung up on her in this Svengali kind of way. He chalked it up to a 1950s, 1960s era image of a boss chasing a secretary around the desk. His exact quote,
I chalked it up to the boss chasing the secretary around the desk, as if that's okay. But I mean, that's how I kind of looked at it. Everybody who was in his orbit knew about it. There's nobody who said they didn't know that didn't know. If you were in his orbit, and that includes all the big actors who he palled around with, they all knew. They didn't know anything about rapes, but they had heard.
As if that's okay, that's the egg on my face right now. Think about that. The woman he loved told him she'd been sexually harassed by his business partner, and instead of cutting ties with Harvey, he found a way to make it seem less serious. This wasn't ignorance, this was willful blindness. The pattern emerges. More victims, more silence. But Mira Sorvino wasn't the only one. Tarantino admits that another actress, whose name he's never revealed publicly, also confided in him about Harvey's unwanted advances in a hotel room. The New York Times confirmed this actress's story, though she asked not to be identified. So now Tarantino had two independent first-hand accounts of Harvey's predatory behavior, and there was more. He knew Rose McGowan had reached a legal settlement with Harvey. He didn't know the details, but he knew something serious enough had happened that Harvey had to pay her off. In Tarantino's own words, I knew he did a couple of these things. There was more to it than just the normal rumors, the normal gossip. It wasn't secondhand. Let that sink in. This wasn't Hollywood whispers or industry gossip. These were direct personal confessions from women Tarantino knew and trusted. And his response? He kept making movies with Harvey for another 20 years. The rationalization machine. So how does a supposedly moral person justify working with someone they know is a predator? Tarantino's explanation reveals the psychology of complicity in Hollywood. First, he minimized the behavior. He told himself Harvey's actions were pathetic rather than criminal. He compared it to outdated workplace harassment instead of recognizing it as systematic abuse. Second, he avoided confrontation. In a 2022 HBO interview, he admitted, "That's a real hard conversation to have." So instead of having that hard conversation, he just didn't. Third, he compartmentalized. Harvey the predator was separate from Harvey the producer. As long as Harvey kept making Tarantino's movies successful, Tarantino could ignore Harvey's crimes. But here's the most disturbing part. Tarantino genuinely believed everyone else was doing the same thing. His quote, "Everyone who was close to Harvey had heard of at least one of those incidents. It was impossible they didn't." This wasn't just personal moral failure. This was systemic complicity. An entire industry choosing to look the other way because Harvey Weinstein made them all rich and famous. The empire crumbles. October 2017. Then came October 5th, 2017. The day the New York Times published Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey's explosive investigation into Harvey Weinstein's decades of sexual abuse. Suddenly, what Tarantino had known privately became public knowledge. The whispers became headlines. The rumors became criminal charges. And Tarantino's 25-year partnership with Harvey Weinstein was over in an instant. But here's what's really telling. Tarantino says he tried to call Harvey after the story broke. He wanted to have that conversation he'd been avoiding for decades. Harvey never called him back. Think about that. After 25 years of friendship and partnership, Harvey Weinstein couldn't even face Quentin Tarantino when his crimes were exposed. That silence told Tarantino everything he needed to know about who Harvey really was and who he himself had become by enabling him. The public confession. I knew enough to do more. What happened next was unprecedented in Hollywood. Instead of hiding behind a generic PR statement, Tarantino did something almost no one in his position had ever done. He told the truth. In a brutally honest New York Times interview, he laid out exactly what he'd known and when he'd known it. He didn't minimize, he didn't deflect, he didn't make excuses. His words, "I knew enough to do more than I did. If I had done the work I should have done then, I would have had to not work with him." This wasn't just an apology. This was a confession of moral failure. He continued, "What I did was marginalize the incidents. Anything I say now will sound like a crappy excuse." But then he said something that revealed the true cost of his complicity. "I wish I had taken responsibility for what I heard. If I had done the work I should have done then, I would have had to not work with him." Translation: Tarantino knew that taking action would have meant ending his partnership with Harvey, and for 25 years, he chose his career over his conscience. The professional divorce. The break was immediate and total. Tarantino took his next film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, to Sony instead of the Weinstein Company. He publicly stated he would never work with Harvey again, but the damage was done, not just to Harvey's victims, but to Tarantino's legacy. Every great film they'd made together was now tainted. Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Django Unchained. All of them were built on a foundation of complicity and silence. Tarantino's artistic achievements would forever be linked to his moral failures. The shifting narrative, damage control. By 2022, Tarantino's story started to change slightly. In an HBO interview with Chris Wallace, he added nuance to his earlier confessions. He claimed he never heard the worst stories that came out during the scandal. He said he only heard warnings like, "Don't get in a limo with him." He insisted, "I had never heard the stories that surfaced later. I thought what he was doing was pathetic, and I wanted to avoid engaging with his pathetic behavior." Critics pointed out the contradiction. How could he simultaneously say he knew enough to do more and also claim he didn't know how bad it really was? The truth is probably somewhere in between. Tarantino knew Harvey was a predator, but he didn't know the full scope of his crimes. He knew enough to act, but not enough to feel compelled to act. And that distinction might be the most damning thing of all. The real cost. A legacy forever tainted. Here's what makes this story so tragic. Quentin Tarantino is genuinely one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. His movies have influenced an entire generation of directors. His dialogue is quoted endlessly. His visual style is instantly recognizable. But now every discussion of his legacy includes an asterisk. Every retrospective mentions Harvey Weinstein. Every analysis of his career has to grapple with his moral failures. The man who created Pulp Fiction will also be remembered as the man who enabled Harvey Weinstein. And here's the kicker. Tarantino knows this. In his 2017 confession, he said something that reveals how deeply this haunts him. The other guys who knew more to not be scared. Don't just give out statements. Acknowledge that there was something rotten in Denmark. Vow to do better by our sisters. Something rotten in Denmark. That's how Tarantino describes the 25-year partnership that defined his career. The unanswered question. So here's what we're left with. Was Quentin Tarantino a complicit enabler who chose fame over morality? Or was he a flawed human being trapped in a corrupt system? The answer is probably both. Tarantino's story reveals something uncomfortable about Hollywood and about human nature. When faced with a choice between doing the right thing and protecting our own interests, most of us choose ourselves. And the difference is that most of us don't have to make that choice while knowing about sexual assault. Tarantino did. And for 25 years, he chose wrong. The relationship between Quentin Tarantino and Harvey Weinstein is more than just a Hollywood scandal. It's a cautionary tale about the price of complicity. It shows us how good people can become enablers, how artistic genius can coexist with moral failure, how the pursuit of greatness can corrupt even the most talented among us. Tarantino's confession, "I knew enough to do more," might be the most honest thing any Hollywood figure has ever said about the Weinstein scandal. But honesty doesn't erase 25 years of silence, and it doesn't undo the harm that silence caused. The question isn't whether we can separate the art from the artist. The question is whether we should. And when it comes to Quentin Tarantino, that's a question each of us has to answer for ourselves. We are committed to releasing 2 videos a week. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more film lore.